You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're talking with Joanne Smith, who is the founder and leader of Girls Gender Equity. It's an organization that will, honest to God, give you hope. And we're talking with Maxine Hanks, one of the gutsy women who is shaking up the Mormon Church, and with Sarah Marquis. Now, she is a true explorer. She has walked alone 10,000 miles across Asia and other places, and whose internal journey is even more profound and fascinating than her external ones. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. Since the headlines this week have been, expectably, still full of analyses of the elections, and that will continue for some time, especially going into full gear after the lame duck session of Congress ends and the new folks begin. But some good news to help lift you out of your torpor, which has been continuing if you're anything like me. Some more proof that the electorate on the issues was with us. It's a little bit bizarre that they then voted into office people who did not stand for those same things, in other words, against their self-interest. But nonetheless, listen to this. While the 2014 electorate was largely similar to 2010, there is one notable exception. Democrats gained ground with women. Of course, not everybody went to the polls. Compared to 2010, Democrats saw a net increase of 6 points among women voters, but this just simply wasn't enough in many races. And African American and Latino women continue to strongly support Democrats by the widest margins, 91-8 among African American women and 66-32 among Latinas. Now, another interesting thing is that many anti-women's health candidates won by running away from their records. Republicans like Cory Gardner of Colorado collectively spent $31 million on TV ads related to women's health, almost all of which, surprise, declared their support. This is a real change in his position. So we won the issue even if we lost some races, because there's an increasing national consensus on abortion access and on women's health more broadly. That's also why the personhood initiatives in Colorado and North Dakota were defeated by 2-1 margins. Even more telling, in North Dakota, one of the most conservative states in the country, both the sponsor of the personhood bill and one of its most vocal advocates lost to their opponents. So going beneath the surface, there's a little bit of encouraging news. Silver linings, we might call it. Hang in there. Now for our first guest. Joanne N. Smith, Master of Social Work, has been on the program before as part of the roundtable of the women from Why We Can't Wait, the initiative to challenge President Obama's My Brother's Keeper. But now she returns on her own and representing the organization she founded and of which she is the executive director, Girls for Gender Equity. And its vision is so huge that you wonder how it could possibly deliver, and yet it does. Welcome, Joanne. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Robin. Thank you for having me.
Well, you've done something quite historic, it seems to me. Girls for Gender Equity, which is not only intergenerational but international. And you're the founder and the executive director. It's an amazing organization. I'm reading now from its own description, committed to the physical, psychological, social, and economic development of girls and women. Wow. You should have been our pioneer program. Tell us about it. How did you come to start it? What it does, just sort of take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Robin. So Girls for Gender Equity was a gift to me, really. I applied for a fellowship through the Open Society Foundation in 2001. I was 26 years old. I was looking for a third way to do social justice work, and I got the fellowship. I also got accepted into a master's program, and also 9/11 happened the first day of programming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Go on.
And as we continued to show up and do our work, it really took off within the community, where young people would come to programming, community members, volunteers would come, and we thought it was a great success. It was going to be a successful 18-month program. It wasn't until about 3 months in that an 8-year-old girl on her way to school in Bed-Stuy was raped. She was raped on her way to school at 8 in the morning by a man wearing red contacts, and she was dragged onto the roof, left there, and made her way to school and fell into the arms of her principal. The young girls who were in the program, this is the elementary school girls who were in the program, came running the programming that day, and they were bursting with energy, couldn't wait to tell me what happened. Very shortly after, followed up with, well, you know, if she act like a woman, then she'll be treated like a woman. If she wear those tight clothes, then she's got to expect that men are going to look at her. And started to recite what they had heard from the teachers and other people in the community. Robin, this was the gut-wrenching, painful reality that we couldn't just be playing with blocks in this program, in this organization. We had to come in here and do real life-changing work.
Yes.
Because these young girls have internalized sexism, racism, the devaluing of their bodies and Black lives in a way that they needed to disassociate and disconnect and find a reason to blame the victims so that they would not have to conceive that it could have been them. Honestly,
well, if nobody sets them an alternate model, of course they internalize what they hear. You know, you have to see it to be it.
Absolutely.
But you made that model.
That's right. And so from that day forward, it was a deep commitment to really do the work that would shift culture, shift also that internalization of self-hatred, and provide opportunities and create the conditions that would develop that model, right? So many hands have touched Girls for Gender Equity, and so many strategies have touched Girls for Gender Equity. But at the core, we are working and focused and committed to gender equity for all, while centering the lives of girls and women of color, and in particular Black girls, and lifting their lives up.
That's huge. I mean, to confront the internalization of oppression is the core of everything and the hardest thing. So tell us about the programs.
So Girls for Gender Equity has 2 core programs. Our community organizing program houses our Sisters in Strength youth organizers. These are our youth organizers who are with us for at minimum 2 years, and who really lead the campaigns that they build on the foundation that their sisters have built from the beginning. And so our Sisters in Strength youth organizers are high school students. They become alum, and they come back, and they each one teach one and contribute to the program. They also contribute to the vision and the strategies as we move forward. And then our Urban Leaders Academy after-school program is a middle school program for boys and girls in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that supports the holistic development of young people in the after-school environment. So we do the things that the school day won't capture. We do work through a gender-race class analysis. We do work helping them to really connect with their identity and developing their identity. You know, middle school is one of the toughest ages and stages in life, and so we work to meet them where they are and embracing the energy that they have, but also the physical and psychological changes that they're going through at that time.
God, it's fantastic. And do you find many, how to put it, speed bumps when you work across cultures, when you work internationally, or do you find that really the kind of techniques you developed travel well?
Sure. Well, we lead gender equity workshops. We lead sexual harassment workshops, and then we also lead workshops around participatory action research and intergenerational strategies for working together. And so we've worked in Brazil, we've worked in Marrakesh, we've worked in France, and really in lending our strategy, we find it as a universal language of young people wanting to be validated. And this universal language is the thread that goes through every stage of life, from then the adults in the room to the elders in the room, really bringing language to their experiences, whether it were around sexual harassment, whether it were around homophobia or racism or sexism, and making the space for them to work out not just what that means, but then where we go from here. And culturally, I mean, the culture decides, right?
Right.
We shape culture. And so we create that space, and they take it from there. And it's actually, especially when we went to Brazil, where we had about 12 different cultures in the room, ethnicities in the room, it was so intriguing to us to realize that we felt so connected by the end of the workshops, by the end of the conference, that it felt like we knew them better than we would somebody sitting next to us on a subway train station.
Wow.
Because the minute you can be that vulnerable and, relieve yourself of gender norms and stereotypes and give yourself permission to think a third way, that's when then the work and the growth begins to happen.
My God, this is amazing work. And who are you? How did you come to do this? I mean, and have this vision?
Wow, who am I? That's a great question. I am daughter of Ramon and Ralph. I'm Haitian, woman of color. I am a sister and a social worker. And I came to this work really to save myself. I thought that I was coming to do good work for young people. I had worked in social service. I had come from Maryland and realized, I needed to do work that served community. And the reality is I've been taught more, and I've grown more from the girls and the work and the people who have come to the work and put their hands on it than I could ever teach or lend.
How lovely. Isn't that always the way? It's so funny.
It sure is.
You learn far more than you teach, and it's a beautiful thing also that you have your alums go back and teach one. So they're empowered, and the knowledge goes on, and it's exponential. It spreads. It's a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
The whole thing seems constructed just beautifully. The United Nations could learn from it in their so-called gender awareness programs. Tell the website, Joanne, so that people can connect with you, and can they donate? Can they contribute?
Absolutely. So our website is ggenyc.org. That's ggenyc.org. It's the same hashtag for Twitter. Also, we are featured in the Anita Hill documentary, Speaking Truth to Power. It highlights towards the end the hope that this generation brings, that they are not a generation that is complacent with rape culture, and that they are doing work to end sexual harassment in schools, and that they're brilliant, and that they are here with us doing this work. You can absolutely donate. You can find the donate button at ggenyc.org.
This was wonderful, Joanne, and thank you for everything you do. So it's gge.org, and thank you for what you're doing.
ggenyc.org.
Sorry, ggenyc.org. And thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you to Robin.
We have to take a short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I am Robin Morgan. You may have read recently that the Mormon Church has been sort of pushed to make new revealings of their past, be more transparent, including the fact that not just Brigham Young, but the hallowed Joseph Smith was polygamous. Well, the next guest is a woman who has been one of the forces behind making that transparency possible. She's been pressing for women's rights in the Mormon Church. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Our next guest lectures and writes about feminist theology and women's studies in religion, mainly in Mormonism. Maxine Hanks was excommunicated from the Mormon Church in 1993, and now, after 2 decades of ministry work outside the church, she's back. Her book is Women and Authority, Reemerging Mormon Feminism, and she's going to talk about that. Welcome, Maxine, to Women's Media Center Live. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Robin. It's nice to be here.
Well, you did something very unusual, and then you did something very unusual again. You, as a lifelong Mormon woman, a member of the LDS, Latter-day Saints Church, and a feminist, you at a certain point decided, I have had it, with a capital H, had it, and you left the church, and you then led a spiritual and active and contributing to the community life for about 10 years, and then of late you have returned to the church. Mm-hmm. I go back to the days of Sandra Johnson, who was excommunicated for her feminism, and now there's Kate Kelly, who's been excommunicated for organizing for women to be lay priests the way that men are. So this is an interesting trajectory that you've taken.
It was actually 20 years ago. I was excommunicated from the church like Kate, and for the same or similar reasons. So Kate and I have a parallel. In 1993, I was excommunicated as part of a group that's known as the September 6th, because I was doing scholarship and publishing about women's relationship to priesthood. What's different is that I and other scholars 20 years ago were talking about reclaiming the authority and ministry that women had in the past in the early church, in the 1800s and early 19th century.
Just let me interject for a second, because listeners may not be aware. The priesthood in the Mormon community is something that all men can hold, and as of now, no women can. In other words, it's not a priestly class, but it's something that any male can attain to and can hold. And in terms of the reference that you just made to the past, it seems to me very much like, in Christianity, the period of the Gnostic Gospels, and Mary was a disciple, and there was all this good stuff, and then you get Paul, and along with Paul, big problem with Paul, and you didn't have Paul, but you had Brigham Young, didn't you?
That's actually an interesting comparison.
So women could be priests at some point, right, under Joseph Smith, but then Brigham Young,
Well, there are some misconceptions. Mormonism has a lay priesthood, which is its great strength, and which is one of the main reasons that I came back. The misconception is that women were somehow ordained to men's offices. And in the first 15 years of the church, women were ordained, or at least they used the word ordained, but they were ordained to women's ministry and women's offices. And not to men's offices. So because there was a gendered priesthood, there was a gendered, I should say, ministry, where you had a lay ministry of men and women both preaching, teaching, from the pulpit.
Could the women do the blessings the way the men can?
Right. The women were doing blessing and voting. The voting in the LDS Church, 1830s and early 40s, common consent, that was an interesting feature. So women had full participation in those lay ministry activities. And then what happened was really two things. The language changed. So later on in the 20th century, because they were using the word ordain, for example, to ordain the president of the women's ministry, the Relief Society, in Mormon tradition, and this was true in the beginning, and it's still true today, so this is what has not changed, is that women had 3 types of ministry, or there are 3 types or levels of ministry in the church. There's the lay ministry, again, preaching, teaching, being a missionary. Then there's the women's ministry, which is the Women's Society, the Relief Society. I would call it a women's kind of priesthood. And then there's temple ministry. So there's a third level. Women participate in all three, and they were ordained to all three, but now it's said that they're set apart to all three. And so the confusion is that in that second category of women's ministry, that's a gendered ministry. The lay ministry and temple ministry are to a great extent ungendered.
Right. I'm beginning to grasp it. But before we get too much in the tall weeds of Mormon theology here, tell me that it's not, or is it, separate but equal?
I would never use the phrase separate but equal for the gendered ministry, the Women's Society, partly because that language belongs to, what happened to blacks in our nation in segregation. And I would call it difference feminism, because feminism, in order to be full and complete, is more than equality or liberal feminism. And you and Gloria both know from your experience and from founding Ms. Magazine that equality and or sameness of situation can tend to take over. Liberal feminism at times can begin to difference feminism. And you have to have a balance. You've got to have both inclusive equality plus difference or separate space, female space.
No, there's no question about that. I'm trying to get at what needs yet to be done. Why did you leave, and why did you come back specifically?
Okay. Well,
you were excommunicated.
Right, I was excommunicated. Mainly, as I was starting to say earlier, 20 years ago, I and other scholars were talking about reclaiming the practices and authority
of the early church.
Yeah, that women had. We weren't talking about inducting women into men's offices. We were trying to reclaim women's ministry and women's authority.
Goodness, so you were even more mild-mannered than Kate Kelly is now.
We were.
But you got thrown out even for that.
And plus, we weren't doing public activism on Temple Square, so that's a new thing. So the new dimension that Kate, her organization, Ordained Women, has been engaging is why not open the men's offices to the women, plus the public activism on Temple Square. That's different.
Do you support or oppose that?
Well, I'm very supportive of all my friends in Ordained Women. I think they're brave and courageous. They had to open that conversation in order to enable the church to see that possibility and try it on mentally and process it. I think the church is pretty firm about retaining the gendered ministry, and I would say I support that because for the very reason that Ms. Magazine was founded.
You do realize you've got a hard road to hoe because I've always thought women will be equal in the LDS church when somebody gets a revelation, because that's how black folks got in. Actually, black men got into the priesthood when one of the elders woke up one day and said, "Wow, this is getting." I'm assuming I'm putting words in his mouth. This is getting really hot and heavy out there. Civil rights movement. We're looking pretty bad. Whoops! Time for a revelation. A revelation, not revolution. And suddenly, black men were permitted into the priesthood, and I'm trying to get at, I think he's no longer the president of the church, but there was a real doozy there, Gordon Hinckley, who was one of my favorite people not to read quotes of before I'd had my morning coffee. It was, it would come out with things like, the women can't hold the priesthood because the Lord has put it that way. Anybody who speaks, has the Lord speak directly to him makes me nervous. And then anybody who says women have a very prominent place in our church makes me nervous,
Right. Well, you heard both messages, and definitely he had very empowering messages and then other messages that were a bit more, from the past. He was actually a strong advocate of women getting an education and having a career and being self-supporting. He actually changed.
That's wonderful. That's terrific. It's about 2 centuries too late, but it is a good thing. I mean, it's like, welcome, Gordon. We're glad to have you aboard. We're glad.
Yeah, it was the 90s. It was about 2 decades after the critical mass of the U.S. What's interesting, though, is that women were ahead. In the 1830s and 40s, Mormon women were ahead of U.S. feminism. because women had ministry, they had voting rights within the church, they had equal citizenship in the church in the 1830s, and a women's ministry or order, in the 1840s, 1842, and you don't have Seneca Falls Convention happening until 1848. So they were ahead.
Think where you might be now if Brigham Young hadn't come along with his with his lusts and his St. Paul-like attitudes. I mean,
Right. There were kind of three key moments when women lost. What happened was the terminology shifted and changed, and then women lost some of their autonomy, and then some of the practices like blessings and healings. It happened right after Joseph Smith's death, when Brigham led the church and the church moved west. And then it happened again at the turn of the century, and then it happened again in between the 60s and 70s. So there were kind of three periods of a loss of some of women's ministry.
Right.
So that really the central tension, as I see it, and this is why Kate's organization is so important, they've paved the way to say, look, here's the other option. We've got to be brave. Let's at least consider what if. What if we, level the playing field and everybody had the same office? But the church has to. The other thing that's great about this time period, and it makes it exciting, is that the church has been delving into its history and bringing forth historic documents and women's history and information that we haven't had before.
What's exciting is that there's a two-pronged approach. I mean, you, with your historian take of saying this is in our own past, let's reclaim it.
Right.
And then Kate Kelly and her group saying, whether it's in our own past or not, let's step out over the edge and do the right thing. That's a very good advice, and I wish you all possible luck about this, because the Mormon Church, separate from its power in the United States, is one of the fastest growing churches in the world. I think the fastest growing Christianity sect or group, and particularly in the Pacific, in Samoa, it's coming in fast. So to come in with sexism trailing it and racism trailing it is a bad thing, and to come in whatever I think of it, to come in sort of more humanistic because of your efforts and hers is a wonderful thing. And
thank you.
I thank you for your work with it, Maxine. I really do. Thank you, and thanks again for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much, and thank you for your pioneering work and being there for me all these years.
It's time for another quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back with a woman who has covered more territory than possibly any other woman alive, walking alone, while you and I are glad when we navigate a street intact from harassment. She has traveled the earth on foot by herself, and her inner challenges have been even greater than her external ones.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. Why does a woman decide that she is going to find out whether she can survive all by herself in nature? Why in her early 20s does she ride a horse alone across Turkey? Why does she, a few years later, fly to New Zealand and set out on a 4-day backpacking trip with only some noodles, eating off the land? Why does she canoe through Canada's Algonquin Park without knowing how to portage? And why does she trek 8,700 miles around Australia? Most of all, why does she walk from Siberia through Asia 10,000 miles? It took her 2 years to prepare. Here is Sarah Marquis. Sarah Marquis, welcome to the program.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well now that I'm speaking with you. I'm speaking with a woman who walked 10,000 miles in 3 years. I am very, very impressed. You are a real explorer. You've done TED Talks, you've written books, you've done all the things that publicize it in order to raise the money, in order to go off and be solitary. The emotional strength and in the solitude that these trips take you, your senses must become incredibly acute, and your sense of being alive must be incredibly acute. Talk a little about that.
Well, when I start a trip like that, it takes me nearly 6 months to be comfortable with myself, you know. You were talking about solitude. It's really that. It takes 6 months. I call that the wash machine process, because it's a bit like that. It's been in a wash machine for that long, because your body, you got pain all around your body, inside out. And I still hear the voice of my family in my head, of my friends, and takes months to get adjusted to this connection with nature. And after 6 months, I feel like I've been peeling like an onion, you know. And finally, you get to the core of it, and you like it's like peeling your skin, you know. You like feeling everything. You're connected to all around you, the nature, everything. And one morning you wake up and you don't feel a thing. It's just there, and you're just there, and you link it to this earth, like connected to it. And from there on, it's just like downhill. It's all good.
It's amazing. And you started out bringing supplies, but then on some trips you bring packets of noodles and a slingshot and a blowgun and a net for catching insects. In Australia, you subsisted on an Aboriginal standby grubs that lived the caterpillar-sized moth larvae.
Yeah. I've been related to Aborigines techniques to hunt, and a lot of those tricks are really amazing. But you need to be able to pick up the sign in the landscape. When, for example, for the witchetty grubs you're talking about, if you look at the ground, you've got a little tree. It looks a bit like dry trunk. And then you've got a crack on the base of it. And when you see a crack on the ground, means underneath, in the roots, you find the witchetty grubs inside the roots. So you need really to be able to follow those signs and pick up the sign that there is something to eat there. And takes a long time to be able. I teach myself that, and takes quite a long time. And I've been really starving doing that experimental trip, where my question was actually, if I'm capable as a white woman to survive in the Australian bush as Aboriginal people do? And I did that to answer this question, and the response is yes, I can. But I've been starving. I've been really starving, like when you get to the stage where that's the only thing in your head. And then, you need some water, and then you realize the water, it's got more importance than the food. And then when you're starving for water, you have to hunt your water. You forgot about the food.
Yes.
So then you realize then it's all in your head, basically. And managing your head and the power you've got inside, it's the key for nearly everything.
Yes, it's the head work that's fascinating. You also, of course, train amazingly for these trips. You begin walking and training like an athlete, don't you?
Yeah, everything is really important. Those little details, that's where the key, the success really, it's about detail. When I start training, I start with few kilograms in my backpack, and then I go on big walks, and then 2 years beforehand, I start that, and then I add 2 kilograms in it, and then 2, and then 2, and then I finally get my body to a mood like it can carry a lot of weight, because the weight on my backpack, it affects all my body, affects all the joints, affects all the muscles and everything. So it needs time. Everything needs time in our body.
Wow.
So it's a long process to be. So you actually avoid injury like that. everything, it's nature takes time. We're part of nature. Everything takes time. And that's probably what we don't really understand in this life here, a bit less.
Yes, indeed.
And the really important thing also, it's nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
What you put in your body, it's the power. It's really a power. So you need to understand that the quality of the food and the quantity, it's the key for your body to have the good fuel. So then after 2 years of really strict nutrition, I know if I'm really in a problematic condition, less food, less quality food, I can go on for a long time with not much inside my body because I've been putting amazing food and build my capital before,
Right.
And over the years, I've been doing that. I've basically been doing that for the last 23 years. So I've got a really strict way of life regarding my food and my sleep, and my body is my car.
Yes.
You need to put good thing in it. Yeah.
The self-sufficiency of this is so admirable and amazing. I mean, you've had a gum abscess while walking. You've had dengue fever. You tied your left leg to a tree so as not to wander off when you were delirious and drown. But I'm also curious, as a woman, I've read that you were attacked by Mongol horsemen who were trying to steal your tent, and you managed to fend them off. But how has this worked for you as a woman in a world where things are not always very friendly toward women?
Yeah, that was the problem all the way, actually. Even in China, I had the same problem. So I discovered early on that my worst enemy was not nature, was not animals, was nothing like that. My worst enemy was human being.
Yeah.
And as soon as I understand the concept, because my idea at the beginning was to have this amazing relationship, and I wanted to meet those Mongolian people. I wanted to meet those Chinese. I wanted to meet those women alone in the woods and have an amazing time with them. But that was a problem. Yeah. My condition as a woman alone was the biggest issue. So I started to hide myself. So I started to cover my tracks. I start to hide in the woods, and sometimes, like in Mongolia, I escape those Mongolian on a horse by sleeping under the road, under those big concrete tubes where the water run, under the road.
The sewage pipes, yes.
Sewage, exactly. And sometimes under those pipes was everything, like dead sheep and whatever was under those roads. But
you were safe.
My main concern was I didn't care whatsoever. I was safe, and I could actually sleep a night, a full night, and recovering from my day of walking. And then I hide in China the same way. And I've been hiding most of the way, all the way down to Australia, unfortunately.
And there's never been an incident where you couldn't either run away or hide or talk yourself out of it. There's never been.
Well, it's been a really tense situation where I thought, well, maybe this is it. That was in a jungle in Laos where I'd get attacked by a drug dealer at night, in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
I was in the wrong spot, yeah. And they had automatic guns with them. And I thought was my I thought that's going to be it. That's going to be here, But then I met, every time I've got a big problem, the solution doesn't lie in a problem. So whatever you're doing, you must do something else, because that doesn't work. Because that takes you in a problem. So with those drug dealers, I stand up and I start yelling at them, and that was getting worse. So I sat down in my tent, and I suddenly be quiet, and I didn't look at them anymore. And I had this amazing idea to look for my little dictionary. I had this micro dictionary with all those language in the jungle. There's like different language, and I start to talk to them with a different voice. And I start to read, I'm from Switzerland. I'm a tourist. Do you understand me? And that's changed completely the state of mind to everybody around me.
My God.
And I've been on and on for 3 hours. So I was getting sick of myself, but I thought, I'm going to go on. Whatever happened, I'm not stopping this. And that, at the end, looked like a bit like a mantra, And then they were sick. They become sick of me. And then
you wore them down.
And they were on drugs. So they were the highs. The highs was popping out of their head. They had those red eyes, And so they were on high. So they wanted something, So they steal everything I had from my tent, my teapot, my fuel stove, everything. I didn't care less,
Right.
And then I thought, oh my God. And then I hear voices going away because that's in the middle of the night. And I thought, oh my God, they're going away. So I keep doing that. I didn't look at them because the direct eye contact is never too good.
Yes.
They've got different culture than I do.
That's right.
So you need to be more really lower than them. And then I've been doing like that for 3 o'clock in the morning. And then finally they went away.
Wow. You expand the vistas of womanhood to me. I mean, it's so moving to me. And then there's this quote that lots of people have been asking and analyzing, why does she do it? What drives her? And there was this quote that I read of yours saying, one day you walk 12 hours and you don't feel pain. Like you said earlier, that after the first 6 months, the present and the past telescope to an all-consuming now. And you said, there is no before or after. The intellect doesn't drive you anymore. You become what nature needs you to be, this wild thing. That is such a beautiful quote, and that tells me why you do it.
Yeah, thank you, because that's always been the biggest question people ask me every time. It's why I'm walking. And I still can't answer this question in 2 words, because for me, the connection with nature, it's everything, And nature teach me everything over the years. I spent so much time close to this earth.
Yes.
Then all my knowledge and all my feeling and all those things that I learned, they're from nature. They're not from the books.
Yes.
They're from nature. And what I wish today, I wish to be this little bridge for people, where I go from human to nature and nature to human. I come back as a little messenger and telling people, hey guys, listen to this nature. They've got the clue. That's where the wisdom comes from.
Oh, it's just beautiful. You are a beautiful human being, and I'm honored to have talked with you. Thank you so much. Keep on walking, and keep on writing and talking about it for the rest of us, and sending your message. And thank you also so much, Sarah, for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live. It really was an honor.
Thank you so much for me. Thank you. It means so much for me. Thanks.
Time for one more quick break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still Robin Morgan, just as I was at the last break and the one before that. What do you know? We'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. W.H. Auden wrote, "Poetry makes nothing happen." Years later, as if in response, Audre Lorde's essay, "Poetry is Not a Luxury," insisted that poetry is a vital necessity of our existence. She was referring specifically to women, but it's true for everyone, whether they know it or not. When Monster appeared in 1972, I was in that state of giddy celebration experienced by a young poet holding in her hands her very first published book of poems. I had no idea that the book, two of its poems in particular, would become famous or infamous, depending on one's perspective. It was a heady time, the early 1970s, being years that people so often really mean when they talk about the 60s. Revolution, both cultural and political, seemed to be everywhere. It was a renaissance period for poetry, too, especially that by women poets and also by male poets of color. These previously stifled or tokenized voices were singing, and people were coming to listen and be moved and laugh and cry as if they were gathered around campfires in ancient bardic days. You know, poets are accustomed to audiences of 20 loyal friends, but suddenly readings drew hundreds of people. On 3 occasions I read to packed auditoriums that seated 1,000 or more. Certain poems in the book made reputations for themselves in varying ways, but the 2 poems that, quote, made something happen, as Auden wrote, were Arraignment and the title poem, Monster. In the original version of Arraignment, I had accused the English poet Ted Hughes of the murder of his wife, the American poet Sylvia Plath. The poem was deliberately and clearly hyperbolic and satirical, implying that Hughes's notorious womanizing and his physical, mental, and economic cruelty, both before and after their separation, drove Plath to suicide. I rested my arguments on the testimony of her own words, her accusations of betrayal, rape, battery, and poverty in her last poems, letters, and journals. My book was in galleys when it was stopped cold. Lawyers for the publisher, Random House, had read the galleys, and on their recommendation, Random House threatened to kill the book unless I cut the poem. I was a young poet about to have her longed-for first collection, and the news it landed like a punch in the stomach. A 6-month nightmare ensued, endless meetings with Random House lawyers, and my trusty feminist attorney, who based her defense of my poem, bravely if unsuccessfully, on free speech, satire, poetic license, and Plath's own testimony. We moved to subpoena Plath's last journal, but Hughes announced that he had deliberately destroyed it, claiming he did so for the sake of their children. We suggested that Random House publish my book with a blank page, black-bordered, where the poem would have run, and stamp simply the word censored on the page, but of course they refused. I felt censored for acknowledging I was being censored. It was difficult for me to comprehend why Hugh Hefner and Al Goldstein and Larry Flint and other pornographers could have a field day traducing feminist spokeswomen by name, calling us sluts, whores, and bestialists in their publications, and that somehow was free speech. But this poem, a poem, was unprotected by the First Amendment? My lawyer's arguments got us nowhere, and I could foresee my life as a published poet ending before it began. But by any means necessary means just that. So I tried another approach, a revision, to imply but not state, and thus get the point across. Thank God for the rhetorical question. How can I accuse Ted Hughes, etc.? I recast the entire poem in a tone hovering between more blatant irony and sarcasm, which, with the addition of a stanza about Hughes's second wife's suicide, oh yes, possibly made it even stronger. I also added various j'accuses against such literary lights as the poet Robert Lowell and the literary establishment, who, along with other critical necrophiles, as I called them, had gone to some length to protect Hughes after her death, writing about his talent but her instability. My poem had a comparable effect to that of my 1970 essay Goodbye to All That, which confronted sexist men in the left by name. But in this case, the poem targeted the literary establishment. In those years, I seemed not to worry about crossing a bridge until I was ready to burn it. To everyone's shock, Random House finally agreed to the revised poem. The book was published, and it took off. It sold fast and well. 30,000 hardcover copies in the first 6 months alone is unheard of for a book of poems and unthinkable for a first collection. What no one, including me, had anticipated was the size and hunger of a new female readership. Then one day, Canadian women contacted me asking if I knew why Monster had disappeared from their bookstores. They'd been told it had been withdrawn by Random House of Canada. On investigation, I learned the Random House Consortium had, without informing me, made its separate peace with Ted Hughes, who had threatened to sue even on the basis of the revised poem. The publisher had agreed to withdraw all copies from any markets in the entire Commonwealth, and Hughes agreed not to lodge suit. And there was nothing I could do. But I was underestimating women. When I told them what I'd learned, the Canadian women were outraged. They decided to publish a pirated edition, but asked my permission to do so, and of course I granted it. Within a month, Australian women and New Zealanders had contacted me wanting to publish their pirated editions, which they also did, also with my permission. This happened all across the Commonwealth, spontaneously, furiously, wonderfully. Then, on Hughes's own turf, an English women's group published and distributed their edition. This was an act of special courage, since UK slander laws are draconian and they carry heavy prison sentences. These remarkable women carried it further. They made it impossible for Hughes to give public poetry readings. Well, the literary establishment, of course, weighed in, pressuring me to call off these women. But these women were not under my control, although I admitted to being grateful for and supporting what these women were doing. Meanwhile, as all this was happening, the furor over the title poem was building. Monster was becoming a rallying cry for women, who made it all their own. Phrases, lines, stanzas, entire sections of the poem appeared on banners, posters, protest signs, buttons, T-shirts, bumper stickers, even note cards. Some called it the anthem of feminism, and others termed it the pledge of allegiance of the women's movement. Well, Monster is now newly an e-book, and thus introduced to new generations of readers and reintroduced to others who have over the intervening years tried hard to find the book, but it's been out of print. I'm not at all sure that poetry makes nothing happen. I do know that poetry is not a luxury. Audrey was right. Poetry is a vital necessity of our existence. And that's it for today. Join us next week when our version of a Thanksgiving Day program will feature a focus on Native culture and extracts from the Iroquois Constitution, on which the U.S. Constitution was modeled. Did you know that? And a special visit by Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Democrat from New York City. Remember to visit us at WMCLive.com for the archive of all our previous episodes, and be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio. with a brain.